Hi everyone, Andy Hagerman here, Avid's Audio Curriculum Manager, based here in sunny and very, very hot today, Tokyo. Today is a momentous day. Today, Pro Tools 2021.6 was released. And there's a lot to love about this, a lot of features, some big, some small. Here are my top 5. Let's take a look. Number 5 and number 4 are kind of related. No matter how many voices or how many IOs that we have, we always want more. So let's talk about voices first. So you're going to get 2,048 voices for any Pro Tools Ultimate system other than HDX Classic. If you want to use HDX Classic, then you're back to the 256 voices per card. But if you're running any other version of Pro Tools Ultimate, 2,048 voices. And this is at all sample rates. On Pro Tools Standard, we double the track count. So it used to be that you could have 128 audio tracks. Now we've upped that to 256 audio tracks and at all sample rates. Jumping to number 4, on a native system, you're going to get more core audio and ASIO IOs. And this has been something that people have been wanting for a long time. It used to be that your limitation for I/O, if you were running core audio drivers or ASIO drivers, was 32 channels of I/O. That's now been doubled to 64 channels of I/O, which really does change the game for native, non-HD native or non-HDX systems. Now, 64 channels of I/O, we're having a conversation. Next up is another feature that's going to be welcome to just about everybody, and that is automatic delay compensation on sidechains. Now, this used to be only available to HDX users. Now it's available to everybody. And what it's going to do is it's going to automatically compensate for the latency created by plugins and so on and so forth for your sidechains, which was one of those weird things that was somehow not covered by automatic delay compensation. And it's easy to set up. Go into your preferences, go to the mixing tab, and then just check at the very bottom, compensate sidechains, click OK, and you're done. Okay, number 2 is customizing themes, and this one is a serious amount of fun. So the first thing to show you is notice here that if I go into my preferences, I've got in my display tab, the UI theme is dark, which is what you're seeing right now. Now, in previous versions of Pro Tools, if you wanted to change the theme, you had to restart Pro Tools. But now you can change your theme on the fly between classic view and dark view without restarting. You can do it anytime you want. Fabulous. We love it. Great, but we're not done. So I'm going to go to my color palette. So if I go to Window, down to Color Palette, so here's my color palette. And you'll notice, by the way, anybody who's used the color palette before will notice that there's a bunch of buttons about track coloring that are gone. But there's something else that's been added, UI customization. And we'll open that puppy up. And now, again, you can change between your classic and dark themes from here as well. But you can also customize your themes. So for example, here's my UI theme. General, let's take the general brightness down a bit. Great, fantastic. And the toolbar, I want to bring that up a bit. So now the toolbar comes up, kind of pops out, fantastic. I'm going to go to grids because I want to see my grid lines a bit brighter. There we go, my grids, and I'll go to clips, and I'm going to make my clips, I'm going to make my waveform as bright as it was, but I'm going to take the background down. I'm going to take the background of the clips and bring it down. There it goes. And now a little bit too much. Now that's a customization that, let's say, that works for me. Now, first of all, is that great? Yes, it's great on its face, right? And notice that every parameter that I've changed, immediately you'll see a reset button. So if you change something and you want to get back to what the default was, you can reset on a parameter by parameter basis, or you can reset all of them and that goes back to the default dark setting. But you can also, if you want to, you can save your preferences here. So let's say this is a layout that I like, but somebody else doesn't. Okay, so I can go to my factory default and I can save these settings just as if I was saving a plugin preset, which is awesome. I can also, if I want to, I can also save it as a preset. So I'm going to save this as preset number 3. And the way that I'm going to do that is on a Mac, I'm going to hold down the Command key. On a Windows machine, I'm going to hold down a Control key. And I'll click the, let's say, the 3 button. And it's going to flash, flash, flash. And now I've got a bunch of different presets that I like. So number 1, I've set to be the stereotypical basic dark, so that if anybody comes in, they want to use the normal dark, great, it's done. If somebody wants to use the normal light, that's number 2 that I've set up. That's the basic default light settings. And now here is my personal settings as opposed to the default ones, which are number 1. And you can see that it changes just somewhat. And so you can customize your settings any way you want to. And here's one other thing that you can do that's pretty cool. I'm going to take this, so this is number 3, so that's my a setting that, let's say, that I like. That's good for me. I'm going to save this as a setting in addition to having it as a preset. I'm going to save this as Andy likes this. Great, fantastic. Now, if I wanted to take this setting and go to another computer, I can do that. So if you go into Documents, Pro Tools Presets, Color Palette, you'll see Andy likes this, or Andy liked this, because I can't spell. Great. So I could take that, and I could save that preset, and I could put it on a USB drive, and I could take it to another system so that I can set it up just exactly the way I want it from a UI perspective. Now, last but certainly not least is the big feature that everybody's talking about, and that's the HDX hybrid engine. And I love this one because this is kind of working from what users really need backwards to the technology and not the other way around. So here's the problem that has previously existed with HDX cards. HDX cards are real powerful, low latency, everybody loves that, but they are limited in terms of the number of voices that they can have. So there's a bit of a bottleneck going on. Now, starting with the Carbon interface, we brought in a hybrid engine, which is really, if you think about it, it's oversimplification, but what it is are 2 audio engines intelligently working together. And I'm going to take a look at this in the mix window. It's probably the best place to take a look at it. Here you're seeing a very, very simple Pro Tools session. And you'll see here that I've got a vocal track with a channel strip plugin on it, and I've got 5 drum tracks that are going to a subgroup, which happens to be a routing folder track. All these tracks, for sake of example here, have a channel strip on them, right? So it's a basic session, but I can show you how this engine works and how to use it to its full advantage. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my setup menu. I'm going to go to Playback Engine, and you can see here my Playback Engine is set to HDX, and I have Hybrid Engine checkbox enabled. And once I do that, you can see I've got 2,048 voices. Not too bad. All right, so now I've got that going. And basically, if you take a look at this mix window, you're seeing something you maybe haven't seen before. And that's this little lightning bolt over here. And what this lightning bolt tells you is DSP. So whenever you see the lightning bolt, think DSP. All of these tracks right now, the lightning bolt is gray. It's inactive. So all of these tracks right now are living in the native engine on your CPU. And in fact, I can even show it to you. If you take a look over here and I choose a plugin, it actually specifically says native plugin. Okay, so if I add a plugin over here, so for example, I'll add, I don't know, let's see, a phaser, because that's the way I go. And you can see here that this is a native phaser. Okay, so why? Because this track is in the native engine. Now, because it's native, it's going to not use the HDX hardware, and it's not going to have that kind of low latency. But here's what I can do. Check it out. I'm going to go over here and click that lightning bolt. And now it's going to say native plugins have been bypassed because the DSP version is not available. Okay, great. So you can see here that the Air Phaser has gone bypassed. Why? Because there's no DSP version of that plugin. However, if you take a look at the channel strip, because there's a DSP version, it's turned green. And that's telling me that this is now a DSP plugin, and even says insert selector A, DSP plugin active. Now, if I add another plugin here, notice it says DSP plugin because this track is no longer residing in a native engine. It's residing in a DSP engine, giving me that low latency, and it's also working on those DSP chips. So I can have tracks individually just going ahead and working like that. Now I can change it back if I want to. If I go over here, boom, click that, and now it's jumped back into the native engine. The HDX engine is still working, but this track is not using it. Great, fantastic, no problem. So this is a single track, and I can get low latency by clicking this, and I can get the power of a native engine in terms of all the voices and all the extra plugins by unclicking it and moving it back when I don't need it. All right, now, here's what I really love. This is great design. I've got this drum track. Now, if you take a look at this drum track, and you can see here that's in native mode, drum 3, for example, is going out of a subgroup. So there is some routing going along. Now, it would be awesome if Pro Tools was smart enough to know how that routing is to go and could make all the adjustments that I need to get that same kind of low latency, even if there was a lot of routing. And yes, we can do that. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to click this, and it's going to say DSP mode has been automatically enabled for one or more tracks to preserve low latency monitoring. Fantastic. And you can see here on the routing folder track that this green button has turned green. It's a lower color green, saying this is a result of another track having been moved into the HDX, the DSP part of that engine. And you can see here that this plugin has now jumped over to be a DSP plugin, so I still get that. And you can see over here it's a dark green. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to see, but this is a DSP plugin as well. So it's made the calculations needed, made the adjustments so that I get all the benefits, even if there's a complex amount of routing. Now, if I go ahead and undo this, boom, now they both jump back into the native engine. Now, here's a little tip. You can take control over this in a similar way that you've taken control of other things like solo saved, for example. And check this out. If you, for whatever reason, do not want this drum sub to go into DSP mode when other tracks within that subgroup go into DSP mode, you can DSP safe it. All right. And you do that by holding down the command key on a Mac or the control key on a Windows keyboard, and just go ahead over here, and I'm going to click this, bump, and you're going to see that it turns white and the lightning bolt has a hash through it. So it's not going to go DSP. So if I go over here and go to drum track again, boom, you'll see that that notification window doesn't open up. And you can see that this track does not go into DSP mode. It stays here because DSP mode is safe. It says here that native plugins will remain active when a track in DSP mode is routed to each track because this is DSP mode safe or DSP safe mode, right? And now if I go over here, you can see here that all of these tracks are back in the native engine. So it's a great implementation of a complex design. It could have gone really, really badly, but it's so easy to use. That single track or that downstream effect workflow is elegant, and our beta testers so far have really loved it. Hopefully you will too. Now there's another interesting kind of a side effect before we leave this feature. In HDX engines, so non-hybrid engines, one of the things that tended to happen in some cases is that there would be a bit of extra voice counts used or extra latency that was introduced when you had a mixture of DSP and native plugins in an HDX engine, because what was happening is you would have to have some plugins were being done on DSP chips and other plugins were being done on the Avid audio engine, and there would be all sorts of round trip voice counts and latency, and so sessions could get latent pretty quickly, and for a reason that a lot of people kind of miss. They would just see their sessions get latent because they were adding these mix and match of DSP and native plugins. This will reduce that because we now have two different engines, and these engines can be separated and be managed in a much more granular way. That sort of round trip latency and that round trip voice consumption has been greatly reduced with this new feature. So again, if you want to use this, go up to the playback engine, choose HDX, and enable the hybrid engine. If you don't enable it, then it will automatically go back into the traditional HDX engine, and you won't have the lightning bolts and so on and so forth. You know, as I'm going through this, there's a half a dozen other things we could also be talking about, but these are my top 5. Hopefully they're going to be useful to you. Hopefully you enjoyed it. It wasn't too painful. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.